McDonald's coffee.
The Broncos are going to lose today.
Never was nothing special. Small. 49ers are biased on KD. That is a stupid idea.
No. If I can't take it when my team...
I'll give the Colts the benefit of the doubt. Madden 21 was so bad.
I'm gonna still like playing. I'm getting my body again.
Has he played? Has he started in the...
Right to tell you.
Tag him on Instagram. Second, on all these tantrums. I could have... Monte Foreman coming out of Texas.
Truly appreciate the offer.
What is up, folks? That one dude 2020 here with Sports Talk Chicago. Man, it's great to put a face-to-face or name-to-name that talks some football. But my man, how are we doing today?
We're doing great. Thanks for having me, John. And yeah, it'll be fun to talk some football and talk about our journeys here in the business. And I'm looking forward to it. Thanks for having me on.
For sure, man. Folks, if y'all, me and John been talking on and off for a while now, talking sports and football. But my man, if people don't necessarily know like your story or who you are, what you're about, how did you get in the industry and what you're doing today?
Sure, great question. I started when I was 13 years old. I started a free website called Sports Talk Chicago, which everybody knows me for today. Started as a free blog, and then after the first month, I got a lot of page views, so we turned it into a real website, got a domain name, did all that stuff. It started with me writing articles. I was not good enough, and I was not comfortable. I didn't know the technology when it came to podcasting and being on air and all of that stuff. So it took me a year, and then I had my first podcast, and then my first guest later would be Len Casper, who's now the radio voice of the White Sox. And ever since then, it's just been growing. And now, fortunately, April is going to be my 1-year anniversary of being on WCKG, Fox Sports Radio here in Chicago, where I have a show every day from 2 to 3 p.m. And I'm about 7 months in now on YouTube, which is something I started. And the growth there has been just exceptional. Never would have expected it. We're at 1.5 subs already. We're moving up quickly. So there are a lot of things to be happy about, but there are a lot of things still left to do and a lot of growing still yet to do. I'm only 21. I'm still in college. And, I'm sure, John, you can relate to that, too. We're still very young in this big field and in this big industry. But that being said, it's really cool. And I've been very blessed and very fortunate to be a part of what I've done along the way. And the opportunities that have been given to me, I don't take for granted at all. And I just pray everything continues to be okay. And we'll see how it goes.
Crazy, man, being 21. That's crazy, folks. That people need to know. You got to start somewhere. You never know, man. Dude, I think done it for a while. I'll send you like a clip of my old stuff from 2 years ago after air, and it was so bad. Like, imagine the biggest pile of like. It was. I would pay people not to watch it, but I get that not having the confidence at first. But folks, I'll just put out the first podcast. You really don't know who you're going to be able to interview or talk to. But the question to you is, of course, talking about this, and if people that are watching that want to get in sports industry start their own podcast, if you could give any advice to any inspiring sports broadcaster or podcaster, what would your advice be?
Great question. I would say do not be afraid to start something yourself and trailblaze and create your own path. That's what I did. I knew a lot of people, and I still do today, who are all about the big company internship. And there's nothing wrong with that. I know people who have interned as a showrunner for NBC or Fox Sports, and that's great. And if you get that opportunity, take it. But at the end of the day, if you're not getting reps, how are you going to get better? How are you going to get better from being behind the scenes versus what you and I are doing, being on camera and talking and talking about sports and getting the reps and being comfortable on camera and being comfortable talking to nobody, right? I mean, we're podcasting, we're in our rooms, we're in our studios, we're by ourselves. That could be tough for a lot of people. So my number one piece of advice would be, don't be scared about not being with the big corporation or the big company. Blaze your own trail to begin, and eventually all of those offers that you really want will come. But instead of them being behind the scenes, they'll be on the air. So if I were you, start your own website. You don't have to put in a lot of money. I told you Sports Talk Chicago began as a free blog on Blogger, which you could still make those today. They're part of they're owned by Google. Then I bought my domain. The domain doesn't cost a lot of money either. And then I started uploading stuff and learning about the industry, learning about the stuff that goes into podcasting and creating content. So, don't misinterpret as saying, oh, I got to go out and spend a lot of money and do all this crazy stuff. No, you could start a free blog today and just write or podcast. There's tons of free podcasting software. It's all about, being vigilant and being persistent and wanting it. If you want it bad enough and you put in enough effort, eventually you will be rewarded.
That's the key that I think a lot of people fail on. You're saying, don't give up if you really want it. Too many late nights, and man, I'll tell you real quick before we kind of continue on with the interview again. If y'all have any questions, more than happy to answer them. When the interview will be over, I'll put for your YouTube page and your content. And again, I wouldn't have you on if I didn't. I watched a lot of your clips and content, like what you bring, folks. There's going to be a lot of late nights. I remember recording in my hot car when COVID first started, and I think this is not. None of what we're talking about. Oh, it's about us. It's about if you really want to be in the sports industry, if you really want to do it, don't be doing it for the money, the bank account, or other things that some people use, fame or clout. None of that matters. You have to want it. I've seen a lot of people, like people that are watching, that see friends that give up because their time didn't come. You never know. Like you said, your first guest, who you got, then first star, I got Carson Palmer, and he's a great dude, guy that I looked up to as a quarterback. But that's folks need to understand. If you really want it, I know we say this is repetitive. Oh, you want to be a doctor, you research, but these are late nights when people are criticizing. I bet you've probably been criticized on DMs and anything else. I've been criticized myself. Like, oh, you should just get a degree and do that. Well, you do what you want, whatever makes you happy. But right now, that person who's a great person, though, is I don't know what they're doing right now. So I wish them the best, but don't be. And I know you could relate to this because you've had a lot of great interviews. I checked you, Doug Gottlieb, when you talked about March Madness. Again, you're doing a lot of great content. Is that when you're making it, because you've made it, it's not about having the millions in the bank accounts. It's having the friendships. That's when you've made it. That's when you get up at 3 o'clock in the morning or stay after working full time and working on the content every single day at 3 a.m. That's when you've made it. So I wish people would truly understand that. But man, the Chicago Bears, I know one of my friends, Callum McClurg, is watching. He's a Chicago Bears fan. I got to ask you, man. I know the quarterback drama has been crazy, just like with the Broncos. When Chicago Bears signed Andy Dalton to the 1 year, $10 million, $3 million in incentives, what were your initial thoughts, and how do you really see this playing out based off of what happened last year and how they basically gave Mitchell Trubisky the middle finger?
That's a great way of putting it, because they screwed him. And I've said that many a time. And you are familiar with my work, and a lot of other people are. They know where I stand on Mitch. And, John, you've seen, I'm sure, on Twitter and in other platforms, people like me are called out on purpose saying I'm a Mitch truther and I don't know what I'm talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about. It is so apparent, and the entire league knows what happened to Mitchell Trubisky here in Chicago. Fans know what happened to Mitchell Trubisky here in Chicago, and a lot of them aren't happy about it. And, there were some who all year criticized me, right, for my loyalty to Mitch. Then they turn around and they see Andy Dalton come in, and now they're thinking, well, maybe Mitch wasn't that bad. That's the correct sentiment. He wasn't that bad. I have nothing against Andy Dalton. I'll be rooting for him. I really want him to succeed, of course. But at the end of the day, the Bears paid him $10 million to do what? To be Mitch's replacement? When they have Nick Foles on the roster, when they could have signed Mitch probably for a discount. Because Mitch signed for $2.5 million on a 1-year deal as a backup in Buffalo. So the fact is that I didn't like the signing. They're saying he's the quarterback one, but, got to wait for the draft and see how that plays out. They could be interested in a number of different options, Mond and Mac Jones. There are a lot of different options for them with their pick in the late first round. But that said, I was not happy with this move. I mean, you kick out the guy you drafted just because he's not as good as Deshaun Watson. You sabotage him to make sure he can't win games or even do anything. And at the end of the day, you're going to cast blame on him and not on yourselves. And by yourselves, I mean GM Ryan Pace or head coach Matt Nagy. And you're going to say, well, it's because of the quarterback that we couldn't win. I think it's apparent by now, especially after the press conference yesterday, in which Nagy said he'll still be calling plays, that people are starting to realize who the true problem is. It wasn't Mitch.
There's too much to say, and we don't have the whole day for this. But I'm agreeing with you. I remember we were talking about this, I guess, right before they were saying, Trubisky's our guy. Trubisky's our guy. They basically gave him the middle finger here. And what bothers me is that, of course, we got Cal McClure says, yes, he's been watching your stuff for a while. He's been telling me about it. Been waiting for John to talk about and rant about the Bears. We'll hear a little bit about that, his perspective, because he's talked about it. But, man, if this is your guy, and they had such expectations. Of course, I know his college numbers weren't the best, but we saw in 20. I don't know if I've seen a bigger 1 year turn backwards for a franchise. You had Mitchell Trubisky, 2018, bro. They went to the playoffs. Like what they were doing that year with that offense. You had Mitchell Trubisky using his legs just like he should have. Then the next year, Matt Nagy does play calling. He shouldn't even be taking orders at McDonald's, much less play calling for the Chicago Bears. And you talk about mediocrity. That is the most mediocrity. And I wish Andy Dalton the best. I'm a fan of him, but I'm glad he's out of Dallas. Dallas is they clearly have they don't have the leadership or the brotherhood that a franchise should. I like Andy Dalton. Think he's not as bad as people think, but he's not the long-term answer, bro. 1 year, $10 million, $13 million, $3 million in incentives. But this tells me the ownership doesn't care about the fans. The ownership doesn't care about the players. Because you're bringing them back. Oh, they went 8-8 and made the playoffs. Not because your team was this great team, even though Trubisky, I believe, should have been their guy. You pick up his fifth-year option. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen with, another quarterback in that draft. Then you have Mahomes doing his thing. Of course, he lost in the Super Bowl. But the problem is with Trubisky is that when you basically benched him, like you and I talked about off air, like, this is over. Not because it's his fault. That cheap of a deal, I'll take Mitchell. And I said this off air, and I said, I would rather have Mitchell Trubisky than Drew Lock right now for the Denver Broncos. It's not because I'm saying Drew Lock. We'll talk off about that. But just seeing how the confidence basically just was nowhere. You're basically telling him, hey, you're not our guy. You're benching him for Nick Foles. And the next question here in a minute is I try to tell Eagles fans, re-sign Nick Foles to a deal, let Carson Wentz play out his rookie contract. But no, Carson Wentz is our guy. And what happens the exact next year, my man? Carson Wentz gets traded to the Colts. Nick Foles is going to be, I don't know, man. But, when you have a system, you have a system. But my question to you is, we talked about 2018 Chicago Bears. What do you think went wrong or what happened in 2018, but that couldn't translate to 2019, if not even 2020?
I think for that team, their defense was at an all-time level. They had over 30 takeaways, which is just unheard of in the NFL today, and they can't replicate that. And you have to remember, when your defense is taking away the ball that often, as a quarterback and as an offense, the field is shorter all the time. So Mitch had a lot of favorable opportunities where you're getting the ball at the 40-yard line of the opposing team, and it's a 40-yard drive versus 2019, 2020, where, your defense isn't helping you as much. You're being forced to have more responsibility be put on you, and it's harder to succeed. Hey, I am not by any means saying Mitch Trubisky is a superstar quarterback, top 10 quarterback, because I do know that in 2018 the defense helped him. And I do know that in 2019 and 2020 it regressed a bit, and because of that, things changed. Matt Nagy, though, also complicated the playbook too much. 2018 was great. Nagy did a great job. I mean, I gave him all the credit in the world when he deserved it at that time. And I still believe to this day that year the Bears would have made the Super Bowl. I don't know about winning it, but I believe they would have made it had the kick gone in and had Cody Parkey not been on the team. Had they had anybody else but Cody Parkey. So there are a lot of things to dissect. I think the run game that year was good, and Nagy kind of strayed away from it a little bit. He didn't emphasize it as much. Receiving options were worse off later on. for the Bears. I mean, like right now, they have Allen Robinson. He still could be traded, and Darnell Mooney, and that's a fifth-round pick who just came off a good rookie year, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a lot of issues with this team. I think 2018 was their year, and they missed it. And ever since then, it's been a downhill spiral. And it's unfortunate to see because they had the talent at the time to be great. And even in 2019, you remember this, John, entering the season, the Bears were considered a premier Super Bowl contender because they still had the majority of their options returning and coming back and being ready. But for some reason, things didn't click. And to me, that all goes back to a defensive regression, play calling. Yes, some of it on Mitch for not adjusting when his defense didn't give him, lesser field position. But at the end of the day, it was just a bunch of small things that added up. And it added up to the Bears now being in no man's land in the NFL.
Why do you think there were so many rumors? And again, this is talking about desperation. Why was this true? I don't know what you've heard. There were rumors that Chicago Bears potentially were going to give up how many first-round picks for Russell Wilson. They're going to either give up Roquan Smith or Khalil Mack. Was that even true, or were they just trying to get some clicks and views?
Look, I don't know for sure. I am not that connected when it comes to Halas Hall and their dealings, but my gut and my hunch is telling me none of that was true. Maybe there was a push made, but at the end of the day, are the Seahawks going to trade Russell Wilson? I mean, let's be honest here, everybody. Anybody who's watching, why is this stuff even being peddled? It's being peddled because Ryan Pace wants to look good. The Bears want to look good. And hey, maybe they did make an offer, and I hope they did. I'm sure they did. They're not stupid. They're going to say something. They're going to make some sort of offer if there's even the slightest inkling that one of the best quarterbacks in football is available. But that being said, does anybody firmly believe that Seattle is just going to trade away the guy who put them on the map? Russell Wilson has such a huge impact on Seattle. We're not just talking about football and Super Bowls and statistics. We're talking about Seattle becoming a national brand. Mm-hmm. Seattle Seahawks football was nothing before Russell Wilson came along. They were being aired at random times. They weren't primetime football. They were out in the Pacific Northwest. Nobody wanted to watch them. Nobody cared. Russell Wilson put them on the map. And even for years to come, when Russell is gone, when he retires or is traded, they're officially on the map now. People care about Seattle Seahawks football, not just in Seattle, across the country. So you really think they're just going to let that guy go and be like, you know what? Yeah, we've had enough. So I really didn't believe any of the hype. It was nice to talk about it and think for a second that it might happen. But I wasn't on the full, oh my gosh, here it is, it's going to happen. I did believe that if it was real, the Bears should offer everything they had. I was okay with that because I know how great of a quarterback Russell Wilson is. But that said, at the end of the day, I mean, if anybody genuinely believed that he was going anywhere, or people genuinely believed that the Bears had a shot, unfortunately, they were misled.
I think people, unless you're true football fans, first of all, he had a no contract clause or trade clause, almost $40 million cap hit for next year in Chicago. Even though I want every team to succeed. I'm not here to I have you on the dog. No, but Chicago didn't really have the money to take on that cap, and that's the thing is you just talked about. It's about the clicks and the views, and oh my gosh, this could happen. I said, folks, straight up, this is not going to happen. And even if it could, even if Chicago had the money, because of the Matthew Stafford trade, it ruined other potential quarterback trades that could have happened based off of the Matthew Stafford trade. I don't blame Matthew Stafford wanting to be traded. This is the thing I've said for almost a year now. But it wasn't going to happen, folks. And really, what I really have to say before we kind of continue on.
This is a load of barnacles.
That's basically what it was here, folks. Because if you watch football, contracts matter. No trade clause means you're not going to be traded, even if that didn't exist. Like you said, before him, you had Shaun Alexander on the cover of Madden 07. Matt Hasselbeck, that team that went 7-9 and went to the playoffs. I mean, you basically just put that on the map here. But as you talk about Chicago, Allen Robinson, man, was there, from your gut, do you think Allen Robinson wanted to stay with Chicago, or is it just maybe he didn't get as much as he wanted potentially on the open free agent market?
Very tough question because, again, I'm not connected. You did see on Twitter and Facebook he liked one of my videos, and it kind of went off a little bit, and that was cool. So I made the case in that video that Allen Robinson should not settle, and he liked the tweet. So what I believe is this. I think he knew the market was not good for wide receivers. I mean, Kenny Galladay is getting paid nothing, really. So I think at the end of the day, he thought, you know what? I'm familiar with this team. They gave me the franchise tag. I'd rather have an extension, but right now I know for this year I'm settled. Maybe I wait till next year and see how the market develops. I just think there were too many factors, and if Robinson had gone the free agent route, I don't think he would have been paid what the franchise tag offered. So for that reason and that reason alone, I think he stayed. I think he's very frustrated with the Bears, and I don't blame the guy. He does deserve a long-term extension. But we have to remember, you can't be extending receivers either until you get a quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
And, I don't blame the Bears for thinking, well, what are we going to do? Extend Allen Robinson and have him play with Andy Dalton? And then who's the quarterback going to be next year and the year after that? The Bears have to get that right before they can sit here and talk about extending options that help the quarterback. Now, I will say he's one of the few wide receivers who performs no matter who the quarterback is. We see this all the time in the NFL. Guys who are very quarterback dependent. Amari Cooper's numbers tanked when Andy Dalton came in instead of Dak Prescott. We know that. Allen Robinson with Mitch Trubisky, with Nick Foles, with Mike Glennon, with Chase Daniel.
A little bit.
All the numbers were the same. Nothing changed. If anything, he was better. He was able to get through all of that adversity and put up great numbers. So for me, that's a valuable trait in a wide receiver. That's why he should be paid. But that said, the Bears have to figure out what they're doing at quarterback, because there's no point in paying a wide receiver when you don't even know who your quarterback's going to be.
This is what people, Allen Robinson had a career in receptions. He had 102 receptions. You really see this with Trubisky and Foles and all the drama, giving Mitch Trubisky the middle finger there. 12, almost 12 and a half yards per catch. 17 touchdowns in the last 3 years alone. 5 to 6 touchdowns, everything in the last 3 seasons. This just bothers me why guys like that don't get talked about, because people only want to talk about players that get the clicks and the views, and that's great. You got to pay your bills and do your job. But guys like Allen Robinson are disrespected. I like Chicago. I just think that he being on that kind of market doesn't help him, but at the same time, it's insane. Like looking at the numbers, 55, 98, 102, 754, 1147, 1250. He had his best year since 2015. And he had Blake Bortles as his starting quarterback. Is Blake Bortles even in the league anymore? And that's where you basically are just talking about that, man. It just doesn't make sense why guys like him don't get talked about. But at the same time, you're right. The free agent market, Kenny Galladay not getting the money, all these other guys not getting what they wanted. But it's unfortunate, man. But if you talk to the Chicago Bears, the 2021 draft is coming up. I know there's probably some needs that you think the Chicago Bears should go after. But if you had to address a position for your Chicago Bears, regardless if it's offense, defense, or special teams, what position do you think would be key for Chicago in 2021?
So there are 3 that I want. I want a quarterback, I want a wide receiver, and I want offensive line help. But if we have to put a priority on which one is more important, it's not quarterback. The Bears have spent way too much money on quarterbacks at this point. Nick Foles is the highest paid backup in football. Now they have Andy Dalton on the roster. There's no need for a quarterback this year. Really. If you claim to everybody that you're committed to Andy Dalton, there is no reason why you should be drafting a quarterback. So the question becomes then, what do you focus on? Do you focus on a wide receiver or offensive line help? What's going to be more valuable for your team? To me, it's offensive line help. It may not be the flashy pick. It may not be Trevor Lawrence or Kellen Mond or, any of these big quarterbacks out there. It may not be big wide receivers. But at the end of the day, if you want to help out your quarterback more, you need offensive line help. You have Allen Robinson. You have Darnell Mooney. Pick up another wide receiver in the 2nd and 3rd round. Darnell Mooney was a 5th-round pick, and he's turned out to be the number 2 here in Chicago. Find another pick in the 2nd round, 3rd round. Have him be your number 3, but you need offensive line help. Mitch Trubisky and Nick Foles were running for their lives last year. And it got better as the year moved on, but the fact still remains it wasn't good enough. And when you have Andy Dalton now, a pocket passer, and there is no one on the roster who is mobile as a quarterback, you have Foles and Dalton who are very, very ingrained in the pocket, then you have to find a way to protect them. So in the late first round, the Bears should really look after some offensive line help. I'm not going to be disappointed if they draft a quarterback, but I just don't see that as a good way to use your resource right now. It'd be different if they were depending on the draft for a quarterback, but they signed Andy Dalton. They have Nick Foles. I hate both those options, but there's no point in wasting more on another quarterback right now. Do what you can to help out your other needs. Don't put all your resources into a quarterback again, because as we've seen, there's too much money on the table for quarterback as it is, and the Bears don't need yet another option to compete for their starting job. It'd be a headache.
When you talk about, like I say, you can talk about the quarterback. Trubisky say, "Oh, he's terrible," and at first I was critical of him, but then I kind of watched the content, watching film. I was like, you know what? I think my mind has changed. But who do you blame for Mitch Trubisky looking like a bust? Keyword, folks, looking like a bust for the Chicago Bears, even though I believe he could be a starting franchise quarterback in this league.
Look, there's no one to blame but the guy who coached him. A pupil is only as good as his teacher, right? So if you have a bad teacher, you're not going to be a good student, and you're not going to learn anything. Matt Nagy came in, and he knew what he was getting into. They told him, we need you to develop this quarterback. We don't know yet. He was under John Fox, which was a train wreck. We need you to help him. And unfortunately, he didn't help him. He made it worse. The pupil is only as good as his teacher. That's the way I put it. So he was taught by Matt Nagy, and look at the results. Doesn't that tell you all you need to know? And for anybody who says, oh, it's Mitch's fault, well, the media narrative, your friendly media narrative is that Mitch Trubisky is a hard worker, good team guy, great clubhouse presence. So wait a minute. So how does that work? How can you blame Mitch Trubisky when the media is telling you? Everybody is telling you. People like me who are independent and people, working at the Chicago Tribune, when they tell you he's a very good kid, hardworking guy, cares about his team, the team loves him and plays behind him and supports him. So it's not the fact that Mitch didn't put in any effort. It's not like a Jamarcus Russell situation. He put in a lot of effort to be great. But unfortunately, the coach didn't reciprocate that effort. And now we're at a point today where Mitch is deemed a bust by everybody. And he has to now go prove himself again, even though you said correctly, John, in some cases, he could have been a starter this year. Could have seen him working in Denver. Could have seen him compete at least in Miami with Tua. I mean, there were some places where he could have gone to compete and or start. And now he's relegated to a backup role because of what happened here in Chicago. So it's very wrong the way he was treated. And I hope and I wish him the best, because I'd love to see him come back and start for some team and prove everybody wrong.
John, no way. I'm giving you free advice right now. You probably will never see this. In 2022, sign Mitchell Trubisky to a 1-year deal. And why do you think, John, of course you were Chicago Tribune, is why do you think the media has so much power over determining which player is or isn't a bust? Because just because they say that doesn't mean it's not true. We saw that with Carson Palmer last year, where there was some rumors saying that, that he's telling Joe Burrow not to play him. And I was like, hey, Carson, I don't believe that is true. We can check that out. It wasn't true. So why do you think the media has so much power in determining who isn't a bust? Because this is a young man, like you're exactly saying. He's a good, hard worker, unlike Jamarcus Russell, who couldn't even watch film.
It's a great question. I don't have a good answer for that. Now, I've had people on my show, and you've seen my interviews with Mike North, and there's a guy who says whatever is on his mind, and he's told me that the problem is that people in the media, are very scared about losing their credentials. They want to make sure that they write the right narrative for the Bears so they're not in trouble with the organization. I don't know how true that is, but I will say that, I'd be remiss if I said that there was no personal bias. And that goes both ways. People know me as a Trubisky supporter, right? And some people are identified as a Mitch hater or, as a Nick Foles lover or as a Cam Newton lover, whatever it might be. there's bias in everything we do. You can't be straight down the middle. And that's just a life lesson. I mean, you could try. I do my best, and I try to be objective. But there are certain issues in which I'm going to be biased, especially with this Mitch thing, because I know deep down that he was screwed. So I'm going to make sure I tell people that. So it works the same way in media. Hey, maybe someone at a big newspaper thinks that Mitch is a horrible quarterback. He's going to write about it, and people will listen. Just like people listen to me when I say that Mitch, I think, isn't that bad, or listen to you when you give your opinions. So at the end of the day, it's just all about understanding how people are biased, what people say, and trying to decipher for yourself what the truth is. You could go and look at Mitch's numbers. They're all over. You could go and look and find numbers that support your point or refute your point. But it's a matter at the end of the day of doing the research yourself. And that's what I tell my listeners all the time. You could listen to me. You can listen to other talking heads and read other newspaper articles. But unless you come to the conclusion by yourself, you're always going to be swayed. So that's what I tell my viewers all the time. Listen to what I have to say, but don't even take that as face value. Go look up Mitch Trubisky stats or Nick Foles stats. Compare them side by side so you see it with your own eyes, that no one is misleading you and that you know the truth.
Eagles winning the Super Bowl in 2013. All I had to say about Nick Foles and that situation. That drives me nuts, man, just because, John, I'm telling you, I will take Mitch Trubisky. I'll admit, though, folks, at first, though, John, before we met, I was a Mitch Trubisky hater because of the media narrative.
I was too. I'm not joking with you. In 2018, I was a freshman in college, and I had a college radio show on my college station. I blasted him every week. I said he wasn't good. I said he's a bust already. So I was in the same boat. See, people don't remember that because I wasn't that high profile then, so I don't look like an idiot. But I'll admit it to you right now. I was very anti-Mitch. I thought he was a bust. I thought the Bears totally screwed up, and they did. Okay, they did, right? I'd rather have Deshaun or Pat Mahomes, of course. But at the time, I literally said many a time on the air, this guy is a bust. And obviously, my opinion changed because I looked into it more and I understood the scope of the situation, and it changed. So as what you were saying, yes, I'd rather have Mitch over Foles all day. I hate the argument that people made all year that because Nick Foles went on a great 6-game run and won a Super Bowl, that just means he's a great quarterback. We have people today debating whether Eli Manning should be in the Hall of Fame, right? Just because he won 2 Super Bowls, he's in or he's not. Like, the point being, there are a lot of quarterbacks who go on great runs and have great moments. But that doesn't mean that in the moment, in the present day, another guy isn't better, right? The same could be said about Mitch and Foles. I'll give Nick Foles credit. Hey, he won a Super Bowl. Not everybody could do that. Great job. But right now, in this moment, who has more skill? Who has more upside? Who has more to bring to the table? Mitch obviously did. And it baffled me that a lot of people couldn't see that. And some people today still don't see it. And, at this point, there's really nothing I can do to change your mind because we saw Nick Foles play here in Chicago this past year, and it wasn't pretty.
It wasn't. That's the problem. Is like you always look at the past, and that's the thing. You think that only Dallas Cowboys fans do that. That people do it with Nick Foles, and he had a perfect system. I will always repeat this, John Elway. If you're looking for a quarterback, because clearly you can't draft one, I will tell you right now, get Mitch Trubisky on a 1-year deal in 2022 because I think plus also, folks, he's younger. You have more time to develop him as a quarterback. Now, of course, Vic Fangio, you're done. But I definitely think he has been. I've never seen. Maybe John, you can contest this. I've never seen a quarterback it's so fast in his earlier career get so screwed over so quickly. He's already labeled a bust.
That is a good point. I can name a couple of other examples that are recent. I think Josh Rosen is one. I'm not saying Josh Rosen is a good quarterback. I think he still is a bust, but I do think that he should have been given another opportunity. The guy was a rookie in Arizona with a 1-year head coach who ended up getting fired, a defensive-minded guy in Steve Wilkes. And then he's now relegated to a backup for the rest of his career. I didn't think Rosen was good. I still don't, but it is unfair the way he was treated. He should have gotten a full year under Cliff Kingsbury or another head coach who was willing to work with him and not work against him. And I would also say Sam Darnold to an extent. I'm not a Sam Darnold supporter. I don't think he's that good. I think Mitch is 10 times better because at the end of the day, Sam Darnold's interceptions, that has nothing to do with wide receivers or who he's throwing to. That's bad decision-making on his part. So I'm not saying he's a great quarterback, but I am saying that it would have been nicer for him to be in a different environment to start. And maybe things could have gotten better. Maybe he would have developed more if he was in a different, better environment with a better coach, better players, and better personnel around him.
I will say I'm a Sam Darnold fan, but also your points are 100% right. But you have Adam Gase as your head coach, folks. Adam Gase, your man Aggie, both should not be head coaching in the NFL right now. But of course, Jon Zaghloul Sports Talk Chicago, my man. Like we do here on the MS6 Sports Center. Before we kind of go, we like to do what we call final thoughts. So let's go to this afternoon's final thoughts. Of course, man, it was good to do face to face or camera to camera. But do you have any final thoughts or shout outs for your type of content or Sports Talk Chicago or anything of the sorts?
That'd be great. So anybody who's watching can find me everywhere. I'm on YouTube at Sports Talk Chicago. We're nearing 2,000 subs already, and we haven't even been a year in, so the growth is amazing. I'd love for you to come over and check it out. You can hear me every day, 5 days a week, on AM 1530 WCKG. That's Fox Sports Radio Chicago. You can listen if you're local. You can check it out and stream it. We're on iHeartRadio. We're on radio.com, which is now Odyssey. There are a lot of different ways you can hear me live on the radio. I have a podcast. Every show is archived in a podcast form. We're nearing 1,000 ratings on Apple and Spotify. I'm on there. And you can follow me anywhere you want right there at that handle, at Jon Z Sports. And you can find me on Facebook, too, at Jon Zaghloul. That's Zaghloul. But, John, hey, this was fun, man. Let's do it again soon. I appreciate you staying in touch. It was super cool.
For sure, man. It'd be cool. And John Elway, Mr. Trubisky, that's all I have to say. But thank you so much, man, for coming on. Let's continue to stay in touch. Thank you.
McDonald's coffee.
The Broncos are going to lose today.
Never.
It's nothing special. Small. 49ers are biased on KD.
That is a stupid idea.
No. If I can't take it when my team...
I'll give the Colts the benefit of the doubt. Madden 21 was so bad.
I'm so like I'm getting my body again.
Has he played? Has he started in the right to tell you?
Tag him on Instagram. Second, and all these tantrums. I could have...
Monte Foreman coming out of Texas. Truly